Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I will take you through the analysis of the registry data. Don't be afraid, this is not going to be a very boring talk. These are my disclosures. First of all, I'm from Antwerp. I've been an orthopedic surgeon for 20 years. I'm using the Evolution since it came on the market in Belgium about 10 years ago. Antwerp is the center of Europe and a very nice place to visit. It's very famous for the diamonds, the chocolate and the beers. Actually, the brewery of the Westmalle, links left in the corner, is actually 300 meters from my door. So you're very welcome to see and to visit us. The Medial-Pivot came more or less on the market in 1994. Introduction of a new sort of design, and the idea, as we heard so many times this afternoon, was to mimic physiological knee kinematics. The goal was a better movement, better satisfaction through better stability. That was the main idea, and this still is the main idea when you use the medial pivots. The other designs forced the knee in non-physiological knee kinematics. Now, if you look at the report of the Australian Registry 2021 annual report, we see a gradual increase of the use of the medial pivot or medial stabilized knee. These are the last figures, 2016, but up to now we're almost about the 15% mark of the market in Australia. And if something comes on the market, usually orthopedics or surgeons are quite precautious. This was the first study, 2013, saying, okay, this medial pivot knee, what should we think about it? Can we use it? Is it safe to use? And we can reassure you at that study that it was shown that the implants provide pain relief, lucky for us, functional improvement, and a revision rate that was similar to what's reported in the literature. So it is a good knee design to use on a day-to-day basis. There's another study from my friend Theophilus about his early data, 15 years clinical follow-up, very good results, 98%. So the early adapters are publishing their results, which was also very reassuring. But you know, if something new is on the market, some other companies are getting interested as well. This was a study on the safe knee, 5 years clinical follow-up. And they say, well, two things. First of all, the medial pivot, the ball and sockets design seems to work. And more than that, it limits really the need of additional soft tissue releases, which we also heard already a couple of times today. One of the first studies, systematic review and meta-analysis, was done by David Beckstein, which I really like to acknowledge for the study. He had several remarks in the study. First of all, there are several generations of medial pivot. The first generation is, of course, the advanced, as we heard, the MRK knees. The second generation is the Evolution, the Safe, and so on. And there's a third category of knees that claim to be a medial pivot, but actually are more based on the G-curve, like the GMK Sphere and the Persona MC, which is pushed into the market quite aggressively. At that time, there were 550 studies or hits on the database, 27 studies on survivorship, and more or less all these studies reported a very good survival. So that's very promising. The medial pivot was seen in 5 registries. And the lessons for the registries are quite disappointing, I must say. They report only on revision rate for any reason. Sometimes they report on all implants, sometimes only the most used, like in the Finnish and the Swedish registry. The etiology of failure is most of the time very, very unclear. And the main problem with the registry data is that all designs are reported as one type. And we know from today that not all medial pivot or medial stabilized knees are the same. In conclusion, some studies may be influenced. The reasons for failure is not always reported. There is a better PROM score and stability, but the survivorship compared to the traditional knee is the same, sometimes even a little bit less. A second study I like to highlight, the study done by myself together with my Italian fellow, Mattia. We looked at that time at 3,655 studies looking at the Medial-Pivot or Medial-Pivot design publications. We found a very good revision rate, 1.9% after 10 years. Mostly the revision was done because of infection, aseptic lesion, fractures, pain, and component failure. Also, and again, the objective measurements and also the PROM reporting were overall better than the other designs, or at least comparable. There was one study done by Kim et al. He published worst results compared to the CR, and all radiological goals were reached. That means if you want to have a kinematic alignment or mechanical alignment or whatever alignment you like, you're able to do this with this Medial-Pivot design. And then a third study, this was published in 2019, very interesting. They compared in this study the results of the Norwegian registry compared to the Australian registry. In this study, 3 very nice questions I think were asked. First of all, are there any differences between the Medial-Pivot TKR and CKR without patella resurfacing? The topic of patella we're going to touch later on, but that's very important already. This can be an introduction to the next talk. Are there any differences in survival amongst the MP design, and what are the main indications for revisions? We're talking here about 180,000 knees, so a very, very large group that were compared. And if we try to answer the first question, the differences between the Medial-Pivot or CR without patella, in the Australian registry, they found that resurfacing of the patella improved survival. So that's a question we have to ask ourselves, why is that? And my possible explanation for that is the influence of stability. As we know, not all Medial-Pivot designs are the same. So I can imagine if you still allow some play, like when you use a Persona MC or a design with some play on the medial side, you will have some more pressure on the patella. And maybe that's the reason why we should replace patella if you use that sort of design. In Norway, on the other hand, no differences were seen. This is the figure from the Australian registry. You see about after 8 years, the Medial-Pivot is performing out the CR design. Are there any differences in survival among MP designs? The Australian registry, the Evolution, the SAFE, and the MRK performing as good as the 3 most used CR implants. The Advanced and the GMK Sphere performing a little bit less in that registry. But there's absolutely no given explanation for that. So there will be, we need some studies to explain the differences between those designs. And what are the main indications for revisions? In the Norwegian registry, loosening, 5 out of 18 was the reason for revision, but there's of course 18 prostheses, that's very, very small number. In Australia, infection, 27%, and pain was a reason for revision. There is definitely an influence on the patellofemoral joint, and studies are very necessary to clarify this. So what should we do next? We have this data from the registry. It's at least inconclusive because of the differences, because of the small numbers, and we need some more RCT power. We definitely need to clarify or to study the different MP designs next to each other. We have to figure out what the influence of the patellofemoral joint is in these registries. So all over, very, very small numbers. Different designs perform differently. We know that as a surgeon. We're talking about 1st and 2nd generation implants, all put together and compared to other designs. We do know that patients prefer the MP and better, that they prefer the Medial-Pivot, and the PROM scores are definitely better. That's something we most certainly can conclude. And the question is again, what's next? The combination of Medial-Pivot with kinematic alignment, in my eyes, looks very promising, but of course, that's something we need to clarify. But anyway, that study is already, we've seen it also today, is very promising for that. So I think the take-home message for today is let's go home, make some nice studies, compare everything, collect the data, And maybe in the next conference we can have some more detailed data on survivorship. Thank you.